started. We are going to be recording, so if you're not comfortable with having your screen on during this time, do feel free to turn your screen off, but we will be recording the session, and we'll be happy to share it with you if you're interested in having that shared with you. So much over to you, Chelsea.
Over to me. Thanks, Kerry and Anna and Mount Royal University for having me, and welcome everyone. Just gonna get my screen here for you. I'm pleased to be talking about Calgary's video game and immersive technology strategy, and chat a bit about Calgary Economic Development's role in the strategy, some of the progress that's been made in the interactive digital media industry. This is a city strategy, and it is, of course, aspirational. It was created based on stakeholder input, and it requires the full engagement from government, post-secondary, industry, and all stakeholders involved. So I'm going to start with a little video to set the scene for interactive digital media in Calgary. Can someone let me know, can you see my presentation? Good, cool. Can you see the video? Another thumbs up, Kerry, thanks. Yeah.
Creative people, they tend to like urban areas where they can find inspiration, like-minded people, and great living. This is why over the years, Calgary's become home to a ton of creatives, and with them comes creative industries. Take filmmakers and ad creatives, for example. They've been hanging out and doing incredible work in Calgary for a really long time now. Lately, though, we're seeing new creative industries: machine learning and artificial intelligence, augmented reality, virtual reality, blockchain, game design. Creative companies in these spaces are popping up and coming up. Gaming is the largest entertainment industry in the world, and we're a player in that space now. Established game companies are moving in, while game designers on a more grassroots level are finding their work available on Steam, Nintendo Switch, and Apple Arcade. AR and VR businesses have found an unexpected but enormous opportunity to help out already established industries like energy. Surprising match? Yeah, a little bit. Accident? Absolutely not. The seeds to strong creative industries have been planted, and now we're seeing them grow. Our schools are graduating skilled people across the board. Graphic designers, game designers, developers, animators, AR and VR talent, whatever you need. The talent to staff or start creative projects or companies is already here, and there's more on the way. Our creative culture is strong. The infrastructure and support are here, and the costs, they are low. Calgary is hardwired for the future. Creative industries here are done crawling. They've already walked, and now it's time to start running. So for companies and creatives of all types that are looking for good living and great opportunity, you'll find it right here in Calgary. Be part of the energy.
So I'm really glad there was a little nod in there to MRU. I don't know if anyone caught that. So as Kerry said, in the current role that I'm serving in, it's existed for the last year and a half, and the reason why the role was created was to take advantage of this enormous global opportunity that we're seeing in the interactive digital media sector, and to encourage the growth of the sector in Calgary. So I also serve on the board of Digital Alberta, who is also supporting Alberta's creative and digital technology companies through advocacy, collaboration, and connection. And I'm eager to continue to support entrepreneurs on their journey and help them navigate tools, resources, and knowledge to assist in their success. And so that's why I'm here today. A little bit of background on Calgary Economic Development for anyone who's not familiar. We work with business, government, and community partners to position Calgary as the location of choice for the purpose of attracting business investment, fostering trade, and growing Calgary's workforce. We collaborate with others to advance opportunities to achieve economic success, embrace shared prosperity, and create a strong community for Calgary. So I have to always mention the economic strategy for Calgary, Calgary and the New Economy, and Calgary Economic Development is a steward of this strategy. Our vision for Calgary, or not our vision, the city's vision, is to be the destination for those who want to solve some of the world's greatest challenges through advanced technology. The key pillars under the strategy are talent, innovation, place, and business environment. All of the work that we do focuses on these pillars and fulfilling Calgary's vision while supporting the key sectors that we see as poised for growth, including our creative industries, which is where we place interactive digital media. You can see from 2019 to 2022, the forecasted digital transformation spend in the province is $18.4 billion, and creative industries will account for $2.4 billion of this spend, or approximately 19% of Canada's spend in the sector. So just flipping gears over to our video game and immersive technology strategy. First, we chose to conduct this strategy because we saw that Canada was emerging as an industry leader in video game and immersive tech, and we wanted to define what the opportunity looked like for Calgary and how we could take on this fast-growing sector. So essentially, we asked the question, how do we best approach building a games and immersive tech ecosystem in Calgary? And we asked for evidence-based recommendations that would look at multiple jurisdictions that have seen success and are coming from comparable market conditions. So we engaged consulting firm Norticity in collaboration with Jason Della Rocca, who is a games industry entrepreneur and the founder of Execution Labs and an early stage investor in over 20 different game startups, to help us create this strategy. And the methodology used, so there were 3 different principal research methods, including desk research, which looked at the context of the global and the Canadian market and identified those 4 comparison jurisdictions. And we'll take a look at what some of the findings were there. And then we also did stakeholder interviews, 2 rounds of them for a total of 21 engagements between industry, post-secondary, and supporting associations. And then on the second round of engagements, we actually brought back draft recommendations and presented those for verification. And then lastly, we did an online survey, which went out to nearly 90 local creators, workers, and companies to provide insights through an online survey. So a little bit of context, why the industry matters, the significance. In 2018, consumers spent as much on video games as they did on home TV, video, cinema, and music combined. So it is the top producing entertainment industry in the world with a global revenue of $139 billion. Top companies typically dominate the industry, but there are surprise successes from indie developers. It's not uncommon in the games industry. You'll often hear people say, at any point, you could be a week away from $1 billion. The games industry is unique in that it requires a specialized expertise. You can see here the value chain, which outlines the 4 stages before a game hits a consumer. And those include development, publishing, marketing, and distribution. So a little background on immersive media. It includes the 3 better known technologies, VR, AR, and MR. VR being a 3D computer generated environment through a head mount display, so HTC Vive, Oculus Rift. AR, a real world environment with a digital experience. So you're probably used to mostly your smartphone camera being an application. You would use filters on Snapchat or Instagram, which we were just talking about how they need to introduce it on Zoom before we jumped on the call here. MR, a hybrid that goes beyond AR. So this would anchor virtual objects to real world objects. And you may have heard the term XR, which is really just a hybrid of any of the 3 technologies. The VR AR market, in terms of context of significance, is also expected to surpass global revenues of $65 billion by 2021. AR in particular will see tremendous year-over-year growth, Although VR will drive revenue, both location-based entertainment and the use of VR for industry or enterprise VR will be the leading drivers of that growth. Some context on the Canadian games and XR markets. So from indie to AAA, Canada has built an extremely strong community of 692 active video game companies from coast to coast, and that represents 2.6 billion in direct GDP contributions. This is 27,700 direct full-time employees, and these are high-quality tech jobs with an average salary of 76,000. It's generally young talent, an average age of 31, and these numbers come from the 2019 study, which were up year over year 25% from the previous year. So we're seeing massive increases and potential for growth. In the 2019 study, Quebec had added 3,100 full-time employees since 2017, a 31% increase, and Ontario grew 5,000 full-time employees, a 32% increase in the same period. So major growth in the sector in terms of employment. We also saw the prairies quantified in this study for the first time. Previously, it was lumped in with the Atlantic Canada and called the rest of Canada. But a lot of momentum was being recognized, especially in Alberta. There was the introduction of the interactive digital media tax credit, which was in place during the study. And there were some recent attractions in the space that were catching major attention. So at the time of the study, 86 video game companies were identified as on the prairies, which encompasses Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. So for success to exist, an ecosystem needs 3 key factors. And the first being talent. So for any regional ecosystem to grow and flourish, it needs to produce, attract, and retain the relevant talent. Local schools and focused educational programs play a crucial role in producing talent, and it is critical to understand the flow of talent and career path decisions made by students to help them realize that careers in games and XR is possible. The second factor is all vibrant ecosystems have the full engagement of 3 critical stakeholders. So that's government, academia, and industry. We call this the triple helix engagement effect. Each party needs to understand and respect their value of each other and the importance of all the parties. And further, there should be clear communication and constant engagement between them all. Lastly, a clear path to a success. So this looks different within every region, given their unique obstacles and advantages, but it is an ingredient that is somewhat recursive in that the more success there is in the ecosystem, the more others see that success is possible. So we actively want to make sure that we're promoting success within the ecosystem. This ingredient really builds on the previous 2 and serves as a concierge to success. Organizations and programs should lay out the resources and options for talent to engage in the ecosystem and for companies to access every advantage available in the region. Taking a look at the local landscape, so what the existing market in Calgary was telling us, our survey collected information on 3 groups, and it was conducted at the end of 2019. So these 3 groups that were identified were companies, workers, and indies. Indies are often also referred to as freelancers or hobbyists. What we learned from surveying companies in Calgary was that approximately 65 companies were working in immersive tech or video games, of which the average maturity of the company was 4.5 years. They employed a total of 200 people, and there was a focus on mobile games. There was limited knowledge about public funding options, the most familiar being the Canadian Media Fund. The majority of companies surveyed wanted to build a larger commercially successful studio, and companies had plans to hire on average 5 employees the following year. Of course, we're not sure what the impacts are come the surprise of 2020, but that was our knowledge leading into the year. What we learned from the workers in the industry survey is most had come from out of market. They were driven to Calgary by employment opportunities or recruited by a company. They were fairly experienced with just under 7 years total experience, and they were mostly all well educated. A lot of people who were working in Calgary actually only had a couple of years of experience here because they had come from out of market. What we learned from our freelancers and hobbyist group is that while most currently work alone or in another industry, there was a strong desire by many of them to be working more in games or immersive media. This also implied to us that there was likely a pent-up supply of probably junior talent in Calgary, and this assumption was also based on the fact that Calgary Game Developers Association has 860 plus active members, but we see only 200 people actively working in games and immersive media right now. Freelancers noted that they would be eager to work in games and immersive media if opportunities were available, and the desire was kind of split with those who also wanted to be able to run their own indie company and become an entrepreneur. We took some time to identify the existing ecosystem assets in Calgary that could potentially be relevant resources and systems of support for the industry. So those included the aforementioned CGDA, the City Association group with regular meetups and workshops, Calgary Unreal Meetup, which is also another meetup group that specifically hosts monthly events around using Unreal Engine, Alberta Mixed Games, a provincial directory of studios, education options, Alberta released games, and more. Digital Alberta, the provincial trade association focusing on industry collaboration and advocacy. VR/AR Association, Alberta chapter. So this is a provincial trade association just for XR companies. AMI, Alberta Machine Intelligence Institute. Additionally, Startup Calgary, who provides entrepreneurial support through events and resources, is a part of the Calgary Economic Development family. Platform Calgary, who provides additional programming for startups and a hub for innovation. Creative Destruction Labs, Rockies, an advanced technology accelerator for startups, Assembly, many other co-working spaces. Thinner Labs and Games was a significant partner in the study. They are looking to launch and support 50 indie game development teams over the next 5 years and are eyeing the Clarence block on Stephen Avenue for their development. And then also Reboot Develop Red. For anyone who's not familiar, it's a boutique games industry professional event, which came for their inaugural year in October 2019 and is committed to taking place in Banff, not in 2020, but for the next few years at a minimum. So we asked in the survey workers, industry, and indies to identify what their key issues were with the Calgary market. And some of the top concerns identified were access to public funding, how to navigate it. The current lack of a competitive provincial tax credit was definitely top of mind and a challenge for local growth, and also serves as a factor in limiting Calgary's appeal as a destination for foreign direct investment in the industry. There was also a lack of awareness identified in terms of what other public funding avenues were appropriate for games industry entrepreneurs. There's the small size of the industry in Calgary was flagged, as much of the communication within the industry relied on personal connections, and there was a belief that the talent pool was also small. So jumping into those 4 comparative markets that we examined in terms of their success in developing a video game and immersive tech industry, we looked at Vancouver, Melbourne, Helsinki, and Austin. They were chosen based on local context, factors of success, support instruments and organizations, education and training opportunities, and strategic plans for their interactive digital media sectors. So Vancouver is home to over 170 studios, video game studios, and 200 XR studios. BC accounts for 27% of the Canadian video game workforce. DigiBC acts as the catalyst for the sector. They provide support, promote, and advocate for the industry. And Vancouver works still really hard to get their name out about their vibrant IDM scene. This is the role that Vancouver Economic Development serves. They also offer an attractive business climate. They have a 17.5% interactive digital media tax credit, a large creative ecosystem, and a long-term presence of global studios, plus a great quality of life. Vancouver's building blocks to their success provide relevant context for our studies recommendations that will follow. Melbourne, home to 36% of the studios in Australia. This state actually drives the sector supports rather than the city or the federal levels. So Creative Victoria developed an ambitious strategy for how to support the industry, which revolved around strengthened funding, a games event, trade missions, both inbound and outbound, and an industry co-working space. Helsinki. So Finland saw quite a boom from 2011 to 2015, making it a major global games hub. The city of Helsinki developed an action plan to strengthen their games industry as a part of the Baltic Game Industry Project. And they identified 3 components for their strategy. So improved access to public support for games industry SMEs, private-public cooperation in city marketing and talent attraction, and a clear route for games industry professionals. And they also had a co-working space, a strong association, and education institutions who contributed to the success of the strategy. Austin, Texas, the creative capital of Texas, and home to many global technology companies. They have a strong entrepreneurial fabric with major, and they compete with major tech hubs like Silicon Valley. Their market is a clear illustration of the 3 key pillars outlined previously, where there is an abundance of educated talent from world-class tech programs, an enticing business environment for entrepreneurs, and a strong creative identity filled with recognizable brands and really big tech names. So if you want more background on any of those cities and how they developed their strategies, you can feel free to download the Video Game and Immersive Technology Strategy for greater details on those markets. The research that was conducted served as the foundation for a series of evidence-based recommendations for a strategy for success. The first recommendation being to encourage and support the creation of a formal Alberta Trade Association. So it was identified that Alberta was behind the ball on this, that there needed to be a trade association representing the business interests of local companies, and that this would be a precondition of building a successful ecosystem. So within each of these recommendations, I will try to provide any updates that we have. Given these were established earlier this year, many of them have some advancements. So we have worked really closely with Digital Alberta to fill this role. They reorganized their board earlier this year with members from industry, educational institutions, and government to support, including leaders from Improbable, Calgary Economic Development, myself, New World Interactive, Big Viking Games, and Unity Technologies. Some with former and current industry association roles with Ontario Creates and DigiBC, who would be the other provincial counterparts. They've been representing interests of the sector this year, both at a provincial level with government roundtables and meetings, and at a federal level through working with the associations and providing input on funding engagements. Recommendation 2 was to create Play Calgary to drive and support entrepreneurship. So much like how Startup Calgary serves as a one-stop shop for all things entrepreneurial and startup in Calgary, Play Calgary would be focused on business, marketing, economic, and entrepreneurial aspects of the video games and immersive media industries. And as such, we saw Play Calgary not to overlap with existing initiatives like CGDA's events or the Unreal Meetup, but to serve that business insight side. So a bit of a progress update on this one. Calgary Economic Development has been working with key industry experts to bring in game-specific entrepreneurship and technical training to provide workshops and determine the next steps to support the industry with relevant programming. Ideally, longer term, there would be a solution like a Play Calgary rather than CED filling this role. The third recommendation was a co-working or collaborative space. In the strategy, it's called the Hub, but modeled after similar spaces in other successful jurisdictions. This location would offer low or no cost office space and act as a physical catalyst for networking and collaboration within the sector. The Hub would also serve as a home, ideally, for Play Calgary, who would have the responsibility to manage the space, run their programming within the space. The concept builds on also one of Calgary's competitive advantages, which is unoccupied office space. And it was noted that absent a tax credit, the space would lower operating costs by addressing the overhead portion of a games or immersive media company's budget, which could, at a broad scale, show a positive sign of the city and province's commitment to supporting the industry and potentially help with that foreign direct investment piece. So in terms of an update on this one, we have brought together industry, post-secondary partners for roundtable discussions with Platform Calgary around the potential of using their space as a co-working space for the industry. We are currently looking to re-engage those conversations and bring those discussions back. We are eager to identify any industry champions who might lead a strategy to help this move along. And the concept was determined to be of great interest from those who did participate in those roundtable and discovery sessions earlier this year. The fourth recommendation is to create a project and IP commercialization fund. It was noted in the strategy that most of the capital that is in circulation in Calgary is inaccessible or maybe just not optimized for early stage game studios or immersive media projects. Thus, a dedicated fund was needed with two streams, one for game project funding and another for commercialization of XR intellectual property. A dedicated fund could catalyze the creation of new projects, and that could form more startups as well. So a little progress update on this one. We do continue to engage with public funders to understand and recommend funding avenues to local entrepreneurs. We are exploring avenues to develop what further industry funds could be created through our conversations with provincial and federal stakeholders like Alberta Innovates, Canadian Media Fund, Canadian Heritage Fund, and Western Economic Diversification. We continue to update all of our clients, entrepreneurs, on the latest announcements coming out of the tech and innovation strategy through the province as well, and are working really closely with Digital Alberta on their engagements with government entities to help in terms of advocating for competitive funding for the industry. The fifth recommendation is to better leverage Reboot Red for the Calgary Games ecosystem. So Reboot, I had mentioned briefly, it is a long-standing European games industry boutique-style conference with a strong global reputation, which chose Banff for their inaugural North American conference in October 2019. So having this event in Calgary's backyard is an invaluable benefit that we need to maximize. One idea would be to connect Calgary studios via direct matchmaking, and eventually these interactions would lead to more publishing deals and investments. Relationships that could be developed by showcases would also help in building a pipeline for future FDI. So a progress update on this one. Of course, unfortunately, 2020 has been postponed for Reboot, Develop Red, and Banff. we will continue to sponsor and better leverage this event for our community. We have a lot of new ideas for 2021 now that we're rolling forwards, and we look forward to working with them on what's possible to help our industry build the right relationships and showcase local success. We see ourselves driving an inbound mission to connect key industry players to our local ecosystem. Recommendation 6 was to facilitate trade and learning missions. So being on the event circuit is a huge part of getting deals done and finding success. It was recommended that there should be subsidized annual trade missions to some key industry events like Game Developers Conference or PAX West. In terms of a progress update, so we did kind of take this and run with it. Earlier this year, we organized our first ever Calgary Games Industry Trade Mission to GDC 2020 for March. We had 8 local studios signed up to attend, and of course, the physical event was canceled, and we're hoping to reschedule for 2021, but there was sponsorship planned for a Calgary activation at the Canadian Gaming Expo out in Silicon Valley at GDC, and also presence at the Mentor Lounge to provide additional exposure for our entrepreneurs to access investors and publishers and make relationships. We helped companies navigate their funding options like Alberta Export Expansion Plan and Can Export, and we organized a GDC 101 prep session for all the attending companies. So we see ourselves continuing to play a critical and very active role for the industry in terms of outbound missions, and hope to pick up these activities again in 2021. Recommendation 7 was to establish the hub as a gateway for immersive media and gamification needs in Calgary and beyond. So one other component that was identified through our stakeholder interviews was that traditional Calgary enterprises and industry are not always buying local. So even though we locally have companies with the capacity to deliver on the immersive media and gamification needs, we thought that the hub could serve as a one-stop shop for anyone interested in exploring the power of games and XR locally, and to connect companies that can deliver solutions. Accordingly, there is an opportunity to better evangelize the power of applied game technologies and immersive media for more serious training and enterprise level applications. So Play Calgary would serve as an evangelist and a lead generator, funneling opportunities to relevant immersive media studios, and Calgary Economic Development would also serve additionally as scouts in directing opportunities over to the hub. The last recommendation, the 8th recommendation, is to optimize talent pathways into games and immersive media sectors. So talent is one of the fundamental ingredients of a vibrant games and immersive media ecosystem. So programs need to be implemented to bring awareness, support, and encourage more talent into the sector. With a more inclusive approach and focus on pulling in would-be developers through the hub and Play Calgary programming, the flow of talent will naturally increase while we continue formal discussions with schools to develop and increase long-term potential of the talent pipeline. Programming at the hub could include things like welcoming part-time developers, having paid internships, more game jams, hackathons, a summer immersion program for students or hobbyists. And as the ecosystem evolves and more studios grow and succeed, likely more and varied talent would be required. So at that point, Calgary Economic Development would need to look into doing a more in-depth assessment again in terms of needs. And progress on this one, we're working closely with our post-secondaries and industry to solve the number and the quality of talent coming out of Southern Alberta for the industry, with advancements being made across many of the institutions, Bow Valley College, University of Calgary, Lethbridge College, Thin Air Labs, and more. So we look forward to seeing a lot of developments in this space come 2021. The ideal timelines for support of the strategy were identified in their optimal order in terms of how it should be executed. And there were also some considerations for implementation outlined, like multi-level funding, looking closely at those comparative jurisdictions to make sure we're not reinventing the wheel, and coordinating between all the stakeholders who will play a role in the ecosystem. We continue to position Calgary as an ideal place to invest for our low operating costs, accessible space, highly educated talent, and an unmatched quality of life. So we do have a lot to be proud of in this emerging sector, and we are excited about the advancements that we are already seeing in the video games and immersive technology sector. A lot of companies are leading in this space locally, like Zero Key, Dirt, VisWorks, Shifty Eye Studios, Red Iron Labs, and Mammoth XR. And we continue to celebrate the successes that we've had in our local market, including the expansions of companies like Unity Technologies, New World Interactive, AMD, and WeWork. I'll just quickly look at some testimonials that we use to promote some of those recent attractions. So Finger Food and Unity chose Calgary because we are the most livable city with a great education system, a highly skilled workforce, and an affordable place to live. They noted that Calgary is probably the best investment opportunity because you can actually grow and expand with people. And New World Interactive chose Calgary to bring together their international team and a second headquarter here. They saw the opportunity to bring together the majority of their team from across the globe to a new home where they could grow. Thank you so much for coming, for listening. Thanks again to Mount Royal for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to present the strategy for Calgary's video game and immersive technology sectors. And I would welcome you all to download the full strategy if you'd like to have greater details beyond what was presented here today.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. Lots of information there. It's a pretty exciting project that you've presented for our city. There's 33 people in our room today, so I think we probably could, if we've got questions, we can just turn on our microphones. If you turn your microphone on, then we'll see that you have a question or comment for Chelsea, in which case then we'll call upon you to speak, just in case we get several people at the same time. I think that's probably the best way to manage it.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Perfect. Hey, Chelsea. I know we spoke a little while ago, but I'm just curious what your thoughts are at this point on where esports might fit into the whole sort of video game design ecosystem here in the city.
Yeah, so David, we didn't consider esports for this strategy specifically, although I know that it ties in closely to the ecosystem. We see it as like rather the development side, the players, right? Like the entertainment side. And there are some pieces happening there too. And your organization is doing a great job of driving that now with your presence here with Alberta Esports. Yeah, so maybe that's the next strategy we conduct and figure out how we grow that ecosystem, but it just wasn't considered for this particular strategy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's like a myriad of places where it could fit in. It could be part of the hub. It could be part of, like it could play a really close role at the hub in terms of like hosting city events and getting others involved to show off the local ecosystem. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on where you feel like it can be integrated within the strategy.
Yeah, so our organization has only been around probably for a handful of months now. So we wouldn't have been around when the research was done for the report here. But I think probably the biggest thing is in the event space and providing a little bit more validation, I guess, to some of the content that can be created through the games industry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you.
And on the talent side, Mount Royal launched their esports
Mm-hmm.
management certification program, right? And,
mm-hmm.
Hi, Chelsea. It's Danelle calling from University of Calgary, continuing education. And I just wanted to know a little bit more about where you see the talent shortfall in terms of your strategy. And you talked a little bit about the value chain of developing, publishing, marketing, distribution. Do you see any, obviously we have a talent shortfall in the development, but do you have any numbers or any thoughts there? And forgive me if I missed that in your presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, so we have talked about that we believe that there's likely a junior talent supply or an overage a little bit on the junior side. But typically when we're speaking with companies, they are still having to recruit or bring in their own senior technical talent. And of course we can't produce that. So there is an attraction piece there, but then there's also potentially an upskilling piece. And Calgary is doing a really, really good job of starting to ramp that up. We've seen a 300% increase in technical talent over the last 2 years. So software engineers, developers. So we're really focused on that, and it's great, but there's still 2,000 open tech jobs in the city. And so it's a very competitive space as well. And a lot of times it's more that these people who game companies, game development or immersive media companies would want might have experience in other industries. So there's almost like an upskilling or retraining effect there that's needed because they haven't had that game specific experience. So I know University of Calgary is looking at a 1 week intensive postgraduate program where you would get like a week hands-on simulated experience where you're in a game development type atmosphere. And programs like that will be really critical for people to get that exposure to the necessary skills to be able to transfer into a game development or immersive media studio.
Thanks. I'm involved in some of that video game talent work that we're trying to put together, so this is very helpful.
Great.
It looks like we have a question in the chat as well from Tyler, and he'd like to know what about sponsorship for venues and events to build an audience in the region for esports events?
Yeah, so again, we haven't put a lot of, in terms of this strategy, we didn't consider esports. We really stuck to immersive technology and video game development. So while we would consider local engagements with esports events and venues, and we're working with organizations who are keen on this. So if there was like a local opportunity, absolutely we would consider it. It's not something that's on our radar at the moment, but absolutely open to exploring any avenues or possibilities. Hi, Tyler, by the way.
Hi, Chelsea. It's Christian Jacob.
Hi,
Just want to follow up on Danielle's comment. We work with continuing education on this post-secondary diploma and certificates program. So you were mentioning our intense 1 week postgraduate experience that we want to create. Do you see demand for a certificate diploma program that expand on that and really becomes part of this pipeline?
I do. I've had lots of conversations with industry, especially where they're like, we really want to get, like, we have great talent, but they're not quite up to speed in terms of like some really key industry insights and knowledge and experience. And I've talked to them about the postgraduate course, and it's of really keen interest. Everybody's looking for opportunities to provide professional development for their existing employees, as well as hopefully seeing other people gaining those skills out on their own before they come with the desire to be working in the industry. So the conversations I've had, it's been of keen interest, and again, I think the more opportunity there is for people to garner the relevant skills and experience, the better our talent pool and our ability to grow our current companies and attract others.
Okay, thank you.
Did you want to plug that program anymore or talk to it? I probably didn't do it justice. If you want to talk about it.
So we are working on this Diploma and Certificates program. We've done this before with data science and information security. And the idea is really to have a stackable certificates program. So each certificate consists of 4 courses, and you can take them in a relatively short period, like over 2 or 3 months at most, and then basically stack these and get into the diploma after with 2 certificates. And then we want to expand it also into a master's program, but that's later. So currently we're actually starting this, getting it through the approval processes at the University of Calgary. And Richard Zhao, who's also leading this call here, is leading this initiative. And so this is working together with drama and School of Creative and Performing Arts and computer science and continuing education with Danielle, because that's very important to also have these smaller units. And so we're trying to figure out what is a good format for that, and hopefully we can offer that sometime next year, end of next year. So we are trying to aim for fall 2021 if all the approval stages work out well.
That's great. Well, we appreciate tremendously the work you're doing in that space.
It's a lot of fun.
Hey, Chelsea. I know you spoke a lot about talent already. You mentioned that most of the shortfall is in upskilling the junior developers into the senior developers. So does that mean there's no shortfall in getting junior developers at this point?
Yeah, that's our understanding. It's Calgary has a good base of junior talent. We only see 200 people employed in the industry, but we see over 860 active members in the Calgary Game Developers Association, which CGDA believes 60% of them are programmers and developers. So there is that recognition that there's this junior talent who might be working in another industry and is eager to move into games and immersive media given the opportunity. And with speaking with local companies as well, they don't seem to have a problem filling their junior talent roles. It's just typically on the senior talent side. And that could be different depending on the position, of course. Like, sure, like a programmer or developer that's junior might be easy to find in Calgary, but that doesn't necessarily mean that like a graphic artist or a 2D animator is. So it could be different depending on the role.
Good, thank you.
I had another question. This last one just reminded me of something, but I had a meeting yesterday with some amateur or hobbyist game designers, and they said what they really struggle with isn't necessarily engaging with junior programmers. Again, this is from a very amateur level, right? But they really struggle to engage with, like you say, artists and musicians and some of those other non-programming sort of skill sets that are needed to make a job or make a game. Sorry. So what do you think is maybe the best way to engage in those other categories or other sort of career fields that are still needed for successful game design?
So sorry, could you repeat the question for me? I just want to make sure I understand.
Yeah. What do you think is the best way to engage more talent aside from just programmers, but from graphic designers or artists or musicians?
Yeah, I think with all talent, like if you're really eager to be working in the industry, then getting involved in different associations and events, like we see frequent engagements for industry, whether it's through the programming that we're doing at Calgary Economic Development in partnership with Startup Calgary, if it's the associations like Calgary Game Developers Association, Unreal Engine meetups, all disciplines that would work within the industry are welcome at those events, and it's a great way to be networking and to be updating your skills and talking to people who would work on those cross-dimensional teams.
Okay.
Some of the comments that I've also heard from like other industry players, like say Red Iron Labs, in talking with their executive team, they said, we never have a problem filling a role here because we know all the talent. We go to the game jams, we work alongside them, and then we know exactly who we want to hire, and we can always fill the roles that we have. So I think as long as you're networking and attending events and people get to see your skills, that's typically the way to go about it.
Okay, thank you.
There's a question in the chat from Lapanche. How will you compare game development industry with other software industries in terms of employment?
So we're seeing, like, in terms of growth, the local game development companies, we're looking to hire on average 5 people over the next year, which, considering the size of many of them, all being SMEs, was fairly significant. Software companies can really range because you could be talking about like a cement, which is hundreds of people, and they're looking to hire hundreds more, right? So it's quite different. And then typically what we learned from our survey is also that people just have a desire to be working in games and immersive media. So they may be a software developer at a traditional technical company, like a fintech company or life sciences or whatever it is. But if the opportunity arose, they would love to be working in games. So often we see people who have a strong affinity for the industry in games that you might not see in other industries, if I were to make some contrasts between the two.
Thanks, Chelsea. We've just got 5 minutes left if there are any other questions or comments. There's a few comments in the chat, Chelsea. I don't know if you're getting to see them.
I haven't looked yet.
Yeah, it's Danelle. I was just saying that, in terms of the value chain and producing talent along that value chain, like, for instance, I see a huge uptake in graphic design right now in my enrollments at continuing education. There's, opportunity for developing the talent ecosystem in marketing and production and all of those things, not let alone just the development side of things. And I think that's sort of what you were saying as well, David.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear some of that, like, early insight on what's happening in continuing education this year and enrollment. I'm curious. I know that there's quite an uptake in 2020.
Chelsea, I'm curious with the conversations that we're having about transitioning the talent in Calgary to meet the needs of the industry and these emerging industries. Did you find when you were looking at those other cities, the comparables, what did you see there in terms of the educational opportunities for people looking to reskill or upskill?
We didn't really look so much at what people were doing in terms of reskilling and upskilling because we were looking at really aspirational cities that had very established educational institutions and talent pipelines. So it was more like, how do we compare ourselves to a jurisdiction that we aspire to be? So of course the talent is already so much more, the pipeline that they have of talent in Vancouver, Melbourne, Helsinki, Austin is so much more established than what we would see here. So it's not quite the same or necessarily like equally comparative right now because we have such an emerging ecosystem, and there's they are Calgary 10, 15 years ago, maybe, right?
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see where, what programs the talent is coming from, what programs are there, because obviously there's a bit of a lead time to educational institutions implementing, as we're hearing here at the U of C, to actually getting those programs up and offered. So I think, yeah, I'd be curious to see where the talent is coming from, where those folks are graduating from, what programs. Yeah, interesting. Thank you. We've just got 2 minutes left. Are there any last questions for Chelsea while we still have her with us? I will thank everybody for joining us, and especially Chelsea. Thank you so much for giving us your time today and sharing with us the exciting things that are happening in Calgary. It's great for all of us involved, wherever we're involved in this ecosystem. I'll leave the comments up here because there are some really great comments in the chat. So thank you to all of you who've put comments in the chat. Thank you so much for everyone for joining us today. Our next Emerging Technologies, our next Emerging Technology Consortium event is on November the 18th, and I'm going to put the links for registration. We are hosting Rita McCoe and Curtis Lessig from AU Arts, and they will be talking about the art of emerging technologies and practices at AU Arts. So a different perspective than Matt Royal can provide on these technologies and how they're being utilized in the education system. So I hope that you'll all register and can join us. Thanks again, Chelsea. We really appreciate you joining us today. We hope everyone will stay in touch.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Chelsea.